I'm Ali and I'm going to show you how to make a coat block so that you can make things like this. It's a basic block, it doesn't include the collar or the sleeves, it's just the basic body block, a bit like a fitted bodice block you'd use for tops and dresses, but with more room so that you can wear it over your clothes. I'll be making a whole series of tutorials on different collar types, how to do sleeve adaptations, all of that, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those tutorials. Once you've got the block done, you can watch my sleeve tutorial, which will show you how to make a basic sleeve block to go with it. But get the block done first because you need to make sure that armhole is perfect. I'm glad to take that coat off because I was really overheating. So I'm just going to show you what you will be making. The block is very basic. It's the starting point. It just has a neck and armhole opening and it's fitted on the bust. There's no waist shaping. It's just a starting point for any coat that you might want to make. So let's see how it looks on. So this is what you're going to be making basically from the block you're going to draft. It's the starting point for a coat. It doesn't have the sleeve yet, but my separate tutorial on how to draw a sleeve will work perfectly with this. But get this right first. Make sure you've got your armhole in the right position. You don't want that fitting really tightly because you're not going to be able to wear a tight sleeve like that over your clothes. So the things you need to make sure you get perfectly right are the neck. You want it nice and close fitting because once you put a collar on that, you need it starting in the right place. You don't want the opening out here or down here. You want the armhole to be a little bit lower than where your armhole would be on a jumper or something like that. So it just needs to be low enough that when the sleeve comes onto it, it feels comfortable. The amount of ease that you add into it really depends how close fitting you like your coats to be. I don't like big baggy coats. I like them to be reasonably fitted. So I've added 8 centimetres of ease into this sample, and that's enough for me to feel comfortable over my clothes, but not too baggy. So it's up to you when you draft it how much ease to add in. But this has 8 centimetres or around 3 inches of ease in it. So the first thing I need to do is show you what measurements you need to take to get started on drafting up this block. So you need a few measurements for this tutorial, but you don't need too many. So let's go through them. You want to be measuring over the kind of clothes you're likely to wear under a coat. So I've put this cardigan on because this is the kind of thing I generally wear under a coat. If you're planning on wearing big chunky sweaters or things like that underneath the coats you're going to make, then put that on to take these measurements because it will make so much difference. So the first measurements you need to take are your waist at the natural point and your bust. So don't measure that really tightly because you don't want your coat to fit really, really tightly. So it's going to be a little bit bigger than the measurements you would normally take because you're adding a little bit of bulk on for these kind of clothes. So you want the measurements with these clothes on, not your regular waist and bust measurement. And then once you've done that, you need to take a piece of elastic or a piece of ribbon or tape or something like that and just tie that around your waist at the same point where you've just measured it. And you need to take a few measurements that go to this point here. So the first one is you need to measure from the elastic to your neck on the front and on the back. So it might be the same measurement on you, it might be different. A lot of it depends on your body shape. So if you get your tape measure, you need to put it from the elastic at the back over your shoulder, close to where your neck is there, and then you need it to go over the bust point and down to the elastic there. So you need 2 measurements, one for the back and one for the front. Where you look at the tape measure there in the mirror, you'll see what that measurement is there, and that's your back because it's coming from the start of the tape measure to there. Take that off the total measurement that you see at the front, and that will give you your front measurement. It's good to do it that way rather than 2 separate measurements because you know then the total is correct rather than trying to measure individual bits, and obviously it's harder to do the back. I always show taking measurements on myself because not everybody has someone who's going to come and take their measurements for them, so it's good to learn how to do it on yourself. So just for example, when I take my measurements like this, I measure 88 centimetres from waist to waist, and then the point on the shoulder is 43, so I know that the front is 45. Your measurements are likely to be bigger than that because I'm pretty short, so my measurement from here to here is really, really short, so don't use that as a guideline. But that's how I work it out. I take the total, then I take the back off, and that gives me the front. So that's the most tricky of all the measurements. And then once you've done that, just keep the elastic or tape on, and you want to measure at the side to where your armhole is. So kind of where the bend is, you want it right in your armhole. We're going to lower it when we come to do the pattern, so don't worry too much about that. So just measure up to where the armhole of your sweater or whatever you've got on is. Then you just want to measure the bust point. So basically the fullest part of the bust where you've just measured your bust measurement, you want to measure from the elastic to that point there. And that will just show you where to draw the dart to when you come to work out the block. So you want it in the right position. Then you need to measure your neck, and you want to be doing this pretty accurately because when you come to do a collar, you need this neck to fit really well. If your neck is too big, then your collar's never going to sit right. If it's really tight, then you're going to feel like you're being choked by a really tight collar. So you want to measure around your neck. You don't want to pull it really tight. You want to measure it kind of quite low down, kind of at this position here. And mine measures 37 centimetres, and I think my neck is a pretty average kind of size, so it's going to be around that. But if you don't get it exactly right, when you try on your sample, you can always adjust it. But it's going to be roughly around 36 to 38 centimetres. So you need that measurement there. And then you need your shoulder measurement. So this is from where you've measured your neck, and you just need to measure out to where you want the shoulder seam to fit. So some people like their sleeves to sit right on their shoulder. Some people prefer them dropped a little bit. But for this block, you really want it sitting right on that point there where your arm bends. So just measure to there. Mine measures 12 centimetres from my neck to where I like that armhole to be, to sit in quite a regular position. Yours is likely to be longer than that because I am very narrow across the shoulders. So just take your time doing that. It's always good to do that in the mirror so you can really see where it needs to be. Or you can always measure the shoulder on a coat that you have that's a really good fit. And then the last one you want to measure is across the front. So if you imagine where your armholes are going to be, this would really help if you have a coat or a jacket or something like that that's got armhole seams like this to put it on. And you want to measure between the bust and the shoulder around this height here. I can't give you an exact height because everybody's different. And you want to measure from side to side of where the seams are for the armholes. I have measured 34 centimetres to where I want it to sit. If you go too wide, you're going to have excess fabric and it's going to be bunching here. If you go too small, your arms are going to be pulling forward because those armholes are not going to be sat in the right place. So if you don't have something you can put on and measure that, just put your arms out a little bit and just feel kind of where the crease is, if you can call it a crease, when you would bend your arms, and measure from side to side. You can always adjust this once you've made your sample. You need to do exactly the same on the back. Unless you're double jointed and you've got eyes in the back of your head, you're not going to be able to do this very well. So a rough idea is to add on 2 centimetres, and that's what I always do, unless you have someone who can measure it for you. And then once you've got your sample, you can always adjust that if you feel like it's not in the right place. So that's all the measurements you need to take. There's just a couple of other measurements that you need to work out before you get started, and there'll be a few calculations along the way. They're all really easy, and I will go step by step through each of these measurements, but they really are easy. So the first one is you need the measurement from your neck to where your armhole position is. It's a really tricky measurement to take if you're measuring like that. It's quite a tricky one because you need to make sure it's measuring in the right place and you need to kind of draw a line across. So all I do is I take the front neck to waist measurement that we did at the beginning, and then I subtract the waist to armhole measurement, and that gives you that measurement. It's just a much easier way of doing it. And then the final measurement, we're going to be drafting a dart up here, which gives it the shape, and you need to work out that calculation. So don't use a dart measurement from a previous block because this might be a slightly different calculation. You're doing it with the measurements that you took at the beginning, your bust and your waist, over your clothes, because that dart might be slightly different if you're wearing a coat over clothes or if you're not, just because it changes your body shape that little bit. It's not going to be much different, but it's worth doing a dart measurement with these measurements. So all you need to do is you need to take your bust measurement, you need to take your waist measurement, and you divide the bust by the waist. So the bigger measurement divided by the smaller measurement. And then if you're working in centimetres, multiply that by 6. If you're working in inches, multiply that by 2.4, and that will give you your dart width measurement. So that's all you need to get started. We'll now start drafting the block, and as I said, there's a few calculations along the way, but really simple things, and I will go through it step by step to make it as easy as possible. If you've got dot and cross paper, it always really helps for drafting blocks like this. You need the width of your paper to be a little bit bigger than half of your bust measurement, and the length of it needs to be a bit bigger than your front bust to waist measurement. The first thing you need to do is start in the top left corner, and you need to draw across the top and down the side. You don't really need any space to the left of where you draw this line, but make sure you leave a few centimetres above the top line. The first thing I'm going to do is do my width. So I'm going to take my bust measurement and I'm going to add on 8 centimetres of ease. That's just over 3 inches. So I'm going to take my bust measurement. So let's use 100 centimetres as an example. I'm going to add on my ease, which I'm doing 8 centimetres. And then I'm going to divide that in half. So I get 54 centimetres. So whatever your measurement comes out as, that's what you need to measure across the top, and do it a bit lower down as well. And then you can draw a line to join the two. So that is the width of the front and the back. This is going to be the back and this is going to be the front. On the left here, from the top point, you want to measure your back neck to waist measurement. And you want to measure it down here and do the same on the other side and then join those up. And then this line here is your waist position. We're only going to draw this block as far down as the waist, and then when you come to use this block to make coats, you can then decide on the length of your coat. The next position we want is the armhole line. So we're not going to use the waist to armhole length because we want to lower the armhole a little bit to give us a bit more space. So you're going to take that measurement, for me it was 21 centimetres, and you're going to subtract 2 centimetres. So I'm going to measure 19 centimetres up from this line on either side, and then I'm going to join those, and that gives me my armhole line. I'm now going to draw in my back position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my back width and I'm just going to half it. So my back width is 36, so I'll just half that, and that gives me 18. And I'm going to do the same on the front, but what I want to do is take my chest measurement and I want to add my dart width onto it and divide that by 2. So my chest measurement is 34 centimetres. My dart calculates at 7.4 centimetres. So I add those two together and then divide it by 2, and that gives me the front armhole position, which is 20.7 centimetres. And then from both of these positions, I just want to square the lines up, and I'm not going to draw this too heavy. Hopefully it's heavy enough for you to see it, but you don't want to draw it as heavy as the other lines. So that's those 2 positions there. And then you want to find the midpoint. So for me, that measures 15.3 centimetres. So I just want to half that, 7.65. So let's do 7.6 because half a millimetre is pretty small. And then from this position here, rather than going up, I want to square down to the waist, and that's my side seam position. And then we're going to be putting a dart on the front. So what we want to do is we want to take this measurement here. So I've got 20.6 and half that for me is 10.3. And I'm just going to mark that position there. I'm not going to do anything with it for now. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to mark on this point here on the front how much I want to move this line by. So what you need to do is you need to take your front neck to waist measurement and subtract your back neck to waist measurement and find the difference. So however much bigger your front is to your back, mine is 2 centimetres. My back is 43 and my front is 45. So that 2 centimetres is what I want to mark up there. So if your back and front measure exactly the same, you don't need to do anything. If your front is bigger, the difference is how much that needs to move up. And if your front neck to waist measurement is smaller than your back, then just leave this line here. You don't need to do anything with this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark in the neck positions. So my neck measurement is 37 and I'm going to divide that by 5. So that gives me 7.4, which is a total coincidence that it's the same measurement as my dart. So 7.4, I'm going to measure from this top line here down. I'm going to measure across this way. And I'm going to measure across for my back neck. They're all the same. And then downwards on the back neck, I'm going to measure 1.75 centimetres. So the back neck we can draw in like this, and the front neck we can do the same. So that's our necks drawn in. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure my dart width. So for me it's 7.4 centimetres and that takes me to here. The next thing I need to do is mark the dart position. So I'm going to put my ruler going down from this line, and what I'm going to do, I'll just measure this point at the bottom and I want to measure up what my waist to bust point position is. So that position for me is 18 centimetres. So I'm just going to draw that there. So that's my bust point. And then what I want to do is I want to join a line from this point to this neck position here. And then the other side of my dart needs to be exactly the same measurement. So I'm going to draw that in, and the top of it I'll just mark quite lightly. And then I need to measure from the neck point here to the bust point. So that's 27.1 centimetres. So I need to make sure it's exactly the same length on the other side. And I don't know how well you can see it, but it's just very slightly below that line. I've accidentally drawn that line a little bit rough, but you'll see that it's just a little bit below. And then I can just fill in that dart. So that is my dart finished. And now all we've got left to do is the shoulders and the armhole. So on the back, we want to measure from this point here to the armhole line. So for me, it's 22.2, and we want to half that. So 11.1 for me. And we're just going to mark that point there for now. And then on the front, we're going to mark from this neck position to the armhole line. So for me, that's 18.3. And then I'm going to divide that by 3. So 6.1. And that's what I'm going to measure up from this point on the front. And that's all I'm going to do with those points for now. So we're now going to draw the back shoulder in, and we need to know what point to draw that down to. So it's quite an easy calculation. So all you need is your armhole depth measurement, which we calculated at the beginning. So for me, that's 24. We're going to divide that by 4. And then I'm going to subtract another 2 centimetres. So that is 4 centimetres. And I'm just going to mark in a couple of places down from the top, and then I can draw that line in there. I've drawn that slightly off. Always make sure you're accurate. If anything's slightly off, just do it again. And then I need to take my shoulder measurement, which is 12, and I need to measure from this point here to where 12 centimetres meets that line. And that's there. And I'm just going to draw that in. The front shoulder is a little bit more tricky, so you might want to watch this through a couple of times, but it's pretty simple. So you just want to draw 2 centimetres below that line, and you want to mark a point where it crosses this line here. And then you want to draw a line from this point here that joins up with that front dart. And again, you just want to draw it fairly light. I'm going to draw it a bit darker than I would normally, just so it shows up on the video. So join that line there. And then you want to take this shoulder measurement here and subtract 1. So for me, it's 12 centimetres. I subtract 1, which gives me 11. And we're just doing this quite light because this isn't going to be a permanent line. And then you want to measure down 1.5 centimetres from there. and just draw this little mark here, and that gives me the angle of my front shoulder. So I'm now going to draw from this point here to join this line. So, sorry, to join this mark here. And then once I've done that, I can measure the shoulder, which needs to be exactly the same as the back, which is 12 centimetres. So it was a little bit trickier, but just do one step at a time. You might want to watch it a couple of times, and then you're just going to rub this out. But I'm just going to cross it out like that so you can still see it. So that's our shoulder lines drawn in. And then the last thing you need to do is just fill in the armhole shape. So I always just do this by eye. So you want a slight curve there. You want a slight curve on the front one. And then these bits here, you just need it to be a natural kind of shape. You might have to do it a couple of times before you do it. I think I've been doing it for so long that I just know what kind of shape that takes. So just to give you a rough idea, this point here measures just over 3 centimetres from this point, and on the back it's just under 4 centimetres. So the larger the size, the bigger that amount will be. The smaller the block, the smaller that will be. But that's the basic shape that you want to do. And that's it. That's all you need to do for your coat block. If you have any issues with the fit once you've made your sample, just look at the body measurements you took. Just double check all your way through this to make sure you haven't made any silly mistakes, because one measurement can throw the whole thing off, and it's so easy to do. We've all done it. So anyway, you just need to now make this up into a sample and see how it fits. So when you're making it, you don't need a seam allowance on the neck or on the armhole or at the bottom, because you want to see exactly where those edges are, because that's where your seam will be when you come to make a coat. You just need to add a seam allowance on the sides and on the shoulders to sew it up, and then a seam allowance on the front so you can pin it together. I use 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch. It's up to you what you use. So the first thing you need to do is make it up. If you need any help doing that, then follow the link above or in the description below, and that will show you how to make a sample out of this basic pattern. Once you've done that, you might need to do some fit adjustments. Sometimes if you've not measured yourself 100% accurately, or you might have drawn a line just slightly off, you'll need to do some adjustments. So follow this video here in the link above or below in the description, and that will get your coat block fitting absolutely perfectly. And then once you've got it fitting perfectly, you'll need to do a sleeve. So follow this link here to my drafting a sleeve tutorial that will work perfectly with this pattern. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you subscribe, as I'll be doing a whole series of tutorials based on making coats. Everything from drafting collars and pockets and sleeve adaptations right through to making whole coats, whole projects. So make sure you subscribe and like this video, and comment below if there's any particular tutorials you'd like to see based on coats.